Let me paint you a picture. It's 9:47 in the morning. A day trader in Manhattan is glued to 3 monitors, heart rate elevated, watching a stock tick up a fraction of a percent. He needs a 1% gain by noon or he closes the position. Every second matters. Every decimal point matters. Stress is not a side effect of his strategy. Stress is the strategy. Now picture someone else. A 58-year-old teacher in Ohio. She's been quietly putting money into a low-cost index fund every month for 22 years. She doesn't check it daily. She barely checks it quarterly. She's not trying to beat the market by lunch. She's trying to retire comfortably in 7 years and spend her weekends with her grandchildren. Same market, completely different games. Here's the question nobody asks you. Which game are you actually playing? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't know. They're making decisions based on tips, trends, comparisons, and anxiety without ever stopping to ask what they're actually trying to win. They're following directions from a map that leads to a destination they never chose and possibly don't even want to visit. And that is why so many people who are doing well financially still feel like they're losing. This video is about stopping that. Not by giving you a portfolio strategy or a savings percentage, but by helping you define your game, maybe for the first time. Let's start with something that sounds simple, but will quietly rearrange the way you think about every financial decision you've ever made. There is no single market. I know, you've heard people talk about the market your whole life. CNBC talks about it like it's one thing. Your coworker talks about it like it's one thing. That finance podcast you half listen to during your commute talks about it like it's one thing. It is not one thing. Think about who is actually inside what we call the market on any given day. There's the day trader trying to exploit a price inefficiency that will close in 90 seconds. There's the hedge fund running a strategy so complex it requires a team of PhDs to explain it at a dinner party. There's the 32-year-old putting $50 a week into a retirement account she won't touch for 30 years. There's the retiree who needs this money to actually live on and cannot afford a 40% drawdown. All of them are in the same market. None of them are playing the same game. And here's where it gets dangerous. When the day trader on a financial YouTube channel says this stock is a buy, he might be completely right for a person with his timeline, his risk tolerance, his tax situation, and his ability to sleep through a 30% drop. For you, the exact same advice might be catastrophic. You're taking navigation instructions from someone driving to a completely different city. The math is simple. The psychology is brutal. Now let's talk about why you feel like you're losing even when you're not. There's a concept in psychology called the hedonic treadmill, and if you've never heard of it, I want you to really sit with this one. The idea is this: no matter what you achieve, your brain recalibrates. You get the raise, you feel incredible for a few weeks, then it becomes your new normal. Now you need the next raise. You buy the car, it's amazing for a month, then it's just your car. You hit $100,000 in savings, you feel proud, then you think, but $200,000 would really mean something. Then $500,000, then $1 million. The goalpost never stops moving, not because you're greedy, but because that's how human brains work. We are adaptation machines. We are wired to normalize our circumstances and then reach for the next level. And the financial industry knows this. It is built on this. Every advertisement, every aspirational lifestyle post, every look what I made this month thumbnail is feeding the treadmill, keeping you running, keeping you spending, keeping you comparing. Which brings me to something I've talked about before, and I will keep talking about because it is that important. The man in the car paradox. When you drive past someone in a beautiful car, a Porsche, a Ferrari, whatever it is for you, you don't actually think about the driver. For maybe half a second you notice them and then you're gone. What you actually think about is yourself. You imagine what it would feel like to be in that car. You imagine other people watching you in that car. And the person in the car, they bought it partly, consciously or not, because they imagined you having that reaction. They wanted the admiration. They wanted to signal success. But you didn't give them the admiration. You gave it to yourself in a fantasy. So here's what actually happened. They spent a significant amount of money, took on the depreciation, paid the insurance, and in exchange they received almost no social recognition from the people around them, because those people were too busy imagining themselves in the car. You cannot buy other people's admiration. You can only temporarily rent the illusion that you have it. And yet, we keep doing this, not because we're foolish, because we're human. No one is crazy. Everyone is making decisions that feel completely rational given their own experience of the world. That's the next thing I want to talk about. Why does advice that works for someone else completely fail for you? The standard answer is that everyone has different risk tolerance. True, but it goes deeper than that. The way you see money, your instincts about it, your fears around it, what feels safe and what feels reckless, was shaped by experiences you may not even consciously remember. Someone who came of age in the 1930s, watching their parents lose everything in the Great Depression, has a relationship with cash that is fundamentally different from someone who graduated during the tech boom of the late 90s and watched their first investment triple in 18 months. Neither of them is wrong. Neither of them is irrational. The Depression-era saver hoards cash in a low-yield savings account and accepts the opportunity cost because the visceral memory of having nothing overrides any spreadsheet you put in front of them. From the inside, that behavior makes complete sense. The tech boom investor takes on leverage and concentrated positions because every formative experience they had told them that markets go up and risk is rewarded. From the inside, that behavior makes complete sense. Same rulebook, wildly different games, because the rulebook was written by their own history. This is why cookie-cutter financial plans so often fail. A plan built on someone else's history, someone else's fears, someone else's definition of security is not actually a plan for you. It's a costume. It might look right. It will not feel right. And when things get uncomfortable, and they always do, you will abandon it. Because a plan you can't stick to is worth nothing, no matter how mathematically perfect it is on paper. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A reasonable plan that you will actually follow is worth infinitely more than an optimal plan that you will abandon the first time it causes you anxiety. Rational versus reasonable. The gap between those two words is where most financial plans go to die. Let me give you a real example of how this plays out.
You're at a barbecue. A friend, someone you trust, someone who's done well for themselves, pulls you aside and tells you about a stock. They're excited. They've been in it for 3 months and they're up 40%. They think it's going to double from here. Here's what you don't know. You don't know their time horizon. Are they holding this for a week or a decade? You don't know their position size. Is this 2% of their portfolio or 40%? You don't know their tax situation. Are they already sitting on losses elsewhere that make this trade work differently for them? You don't know their exit strategy. Do they have one? And you definitely don't know how they'll behave when it drops 20% next month, because it very well might. And you definitely don't know how you will behave. You don't know if you're the kind of person who can watch a position fall by half and hold steady. Most people, when it actually happens, discover they are not that person. Not because they're weak, because they didn't know what game they were playing when they got in. A hot tip is not a strategy. It's someone else's strategy leaking into your life without the context that makes it work. A supertanker takes miles to turn. You can't grab someone else's wheel mid-ocean and expect to end up where you wanted to go. So what's the alternative? It starts with a question that sounds almost insultingly simple. What are you actually trying to do? Not what does your financial advisor think you should do. Not what your most successful friend is doing. Not what the algorithm is currently surfacing. What do you actually want your life to feel like? And how does money serve that? Because here's what I believe, and what the research broadly supports. Wealth is not a scoreboard. The people who genuinely feel wealthy, not just rich, but actually free, aren't the ones with the biggest number. They're the ones who have achieved control over their time. That's it. That is the whole game if you play it right.
The ability to wake up on a Tuesday morning and decide what you are going to do with your day. Not because you're told, not because you're obligated, but because your financial life has been built in a way that makes that possible. The highest dividend money pays is not a percentage, it's not a capital gain, it's optionality. It's the morning where nobody owns your time but you. And here's the strange thing about that kind of wealth. You can't see it. You can't photograph it. It doesn't make a sound when you pull up to a restaurant. The person sitting across from you at dinner has no idea whether you have it. Wealth is what you don't see. It's the purchases you didn't make, the options you haven't used yet, the quiet, invisible runway that lets you say no to things that don't serve you and yes to things that do. Rich is what people see. Wealthy is what you feel. And they are very, very different things. Let me slow down for a second and acknowledge something. I know this is easier to say than to live. Because we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist in a social world where other people's choices are constantly visible, where someone in your circle just bought a house that made you look at your own differently, where someone from your graduating class just posted about their exit and it did something complicated to your chest. That feeling is not weakness. That feeling is evolution. Your brain was built for a world where falling behind the tribe was a survival threat. The anxiety you feel when you perceive yourself as behind is not irrational. It is ancient. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do in an environment it was never designed for. You cannot shame yourself out of comparison, but you can build a framework strong enough that comparison stops having so much power over your decisions. And that framework starts with one thing: defining your game. Here's what I want you to actually do after this video ends. I want you to write down 3 things. First, your enough number. Not your dream number, not your if I could have anything number, your enough number. The specific amount in savings, in monthly income, in net worth, whatever metric makes sense to you, where you would genuinely feel financially secure, where the anxiety eases, where you could breathe. Most people have never done this. They've pursued more their entire adult lives without ever defining what enough looks like. So the goalpost keeps moving, not because they're greedy, but because they never planted it in the ground. Second, your time horizon. How long is your game? Are you 30 years from retirement or 3? Are you building generational wealth or funding a sabbatical in 5 years? The answer changes everything. The risk you should take, the assets you should hold, the advice you should listen to. And third, your real risk tolerance. Not the number you put on a questionnaire, your actual, honest, what would I do if this dropped 40% tolerance. Because that's the only risk tolerance that matters, the one that holds when things get real. When you have those 3 things written down, something shifts. You have a map, your map, built for your destination. And for the first time, you can start ignoring the noise. Not because you're arrogant, but because you know where you're going and you can see that the noise is pointing somewhere else. Let me leave you with this. The reason so many people feel financially anxious, despite earning more than any previous generation, despite having more information than any investor in history, despite living in the most prosperous period humanity has ever known, is not because they're doing it wrong. It's because they're playing someone else's game. They're using someone else's definition of winning, someone else's timeline, someone else's risk tolerance, someone else's vision of what a financially successful life looks like. And you can't win a game that was never designed for you. The financial peace you're looking for isn't at the next income level. It's not in the next market cycle. It's not in a better stock pick or a more aggressive savings rate. It's in the moment you stop running someone else's race and decide what your finish line actually looks like. Wealth is what you don't need to have anymore. Define your enough, plant your goalpost, and stop taking directions from a map that was never yours. If this landed for you, share it with someone who's been running hard but isn't sure what they're running towards. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone is a reason to stop and look up. Subscribe if you want more of this. Not tips, not predictions, Just honest thinking about money and the life it's supposed to build. See you next week.